Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. And today we have a special guest. We have Nancie Vito, who is a coach for inspiring entrepreneurs who want to reduce burnout, get unstuck, and take simple steps towards what they truly want in life. With a background in mental health, her interests lie in mindset, mindfulness, and motivation. So let's learn a little bit more how the mind plays a role in all this with Nancie. So Nancie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Byron. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, glad that you're here. So how did you get into this? I mean, it sounds like you have this amazing background from mental health to motivation. Like, oh, wow, this is fascinating.
Yeah. So, yes, as you mentioned, I worked in mental health and in public health for many years. And I got to a point where I was actually a bit burnt out. And one of the positions I had where I was working at a university, I did a lot of depression training, suicide prevention trainings, things like that. And I was becoming known in my department as what they called the depression expert. And that's all well and good. And trust me, there is a time and place for that, and time and place, of course, for mental health treatment and all of that. I do believe that 100%. I was at a point in my life where it just started to feel very heavy. And I had to do some reflection, and at that point, I started learning more and more about the study of happiness and well-being and what's called human flourishing. And this was about in 2008, 2009. And once I started really delving into that topic and learning more and more about it, I was just so engaged in it, and I just couldn't soak it up fast enough. And I was like, all right, that's what I need right now, both personally and professionally, because like I said, I was getting burnt out myself, and I realized, okay, this is helping me. I got myself into a good place, and then I went on to coaching other people to do the same thing.
Now, what's fascinating is that, you're down this path, and for you to go into the whole mental health area, I mean, it's a noble thing that is a necessary part of society, but that had to take an emotional toll to constantly having to deal with people if they're depressed, they're suicidal, to pull them up. How did you deal with that?
You know what? There's a lot that you can do to focus on self-care. And in a way, at the end of the day, you have to learn to separate yourself from that. And at the same time, it's very hard because, like I said, it feels heavy a lot of the times. And it's also, if there's something major going on with one of your clients and you take that home with you, it can have a major ripple effect. So I would make a conscious effort to separate myself from that. And, I did a lot of research at the time. I was a research coordinator and research assistant for various, psychologists, psychiatrists. And so I interviewed thousands of people, actually. And the stories that I would hear were just absolutely heartbreaking. And, and I didn't have the tools at the time, the tools and the techniques to completely 100% separate myself. And, as a human being, it's hard to come home at the end of the day and ignore the other stuff. So it was a constant learning experience and constant journey in that area, really.
So at what point did you decide that you wanted to do something different? Because so many people, when they're burned out, some just keep on going and they eventually hit rock bottom. But what was that deciding factor for you so you didn't hit the bottom and like, whoa, I'm in the basement of the basement?
Yes. Well, it's interesting you said basement because there were two turning points. One of them was, there was at one point I was working for a psychologist in his basement, actually. And at that point, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed, burnt out. It was a lot of paperwork, a lot of report writing after we would interview folks, a lot of testing, things like that. And basically, I got to a point where I felt out of alignment with my values, if that made sense. It was a position where I had originally signed up for and interviewed for because it was helping people, and it was basically helping people who were living with disabilities, in a nutshell. And basically, I after a while just realized I was out of alignment. Something wasn't feeling right because it was more about the numbers and seeing more and more people and cramming as many people as you could into a day and that sort of thing. And there were people who really needed help, and we had to shuffle them in and out. Well, right about that time, I was also getting very sick, and just constantly there was always something wrong. So it was actually starting to affect my physical health. It was affecting me emotionally, mentally. It was affecting my relationships because I would be grumpy and irritable all the time. Not pretty. And then I was in a car wreck. And it was, one of those things that was just very symbolic of where I was at the time. Now, physically I was okay. But basically, I was sitting at a traffic light one day. My light turned green. I started to move forward, and there was a cement truck coming the other direction, and the guy ran his light that was red, so it hit my car. So this big cement truck, I'm laughing. I know it doesn't sound very funny, but I was fine. I'm fine. So I can look back at this, of course, and be okay with it all. But looking back, there's so many metaphors in there. Not only was it a cement truck, which also has that symbolic feeling of being stuck, the symbolic meaning
Right.
of being stuck. And my car was totaled, so it was also burnt out. So there's so many things I can look back on and be like, okay, I can see some things here. And I just realized that something had to change. Now, not too long after that, of course, I left that job. I worked for university after that. And right at the time where I started to get burnt out at the university, because, of course, things will keep showing up if you don't learn the lesson the first time, right? So I pretty much just went from one place to another. I was still basically causing my own stress and overwhelm. And that was my aha moment, was when I realized that a lot of these, of course, the environment was very heavy, like I said, and could be very stressful at the time, but I realized that I was causing a lot of my own stress and overwhelm. And do you know that saying? There's a saying that, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Oh, yes.
Well, yes. Well, that's pretty much what happened, because I had the opportunity to see a sociologist speak at the university that I worked at, and he studies the concept of human flourishing. And after seeing him speak, I saw him speak a few times, every time I would be just sitting straight up in my chair. I would be so engaged. I was just writing notes. And that was the point that changed everything pretty much. So there was a turning point where I had the wreck, and then there was a turning point where I was getting burnt out again in another job and realized I'm causing my own stress and overwhelm. And then I saw the professor speak, and I was like, that's what I need. And then ultimately, that's what I want to do for a living. It just seemed, it's more positive mental health on the whole spectrum. And again, there's a time and place for mental health treatment and that sort of thing. But helping people flourish in their lives is something that truly excites me and truly, lights me up, really, just to see people go from where I was, stuck, burnt out, just kind of floundering from day to day, to really going towards what they really want in life and what really makes them happy.
Right, definitely. It does add a twist to things, when you hear someone say, I feel like I've been hit like a truck, you say, no, probably not.
Right. 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 Yeah. And certainly, I look at this now as a prevention point of view, because, You don't need to hit rock bottom, although many people do. You don't need to get to that point to literally be hit by a truck or, to hit rock bottom. And what I'm seeing is when people come to me burnt out in their jobs, it's that they didn't recognize those signs. They didn't recognize the little things that were adding up until they're just freaking exhausted. You know, they're mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted. And then they realize, all right, I can't go on like this anymore. Something has to change.
Right. So for most people, what are those signs that start appearing when they're going to be burned out that start manifesting themselves?
Yeah, great question. So when you become disengaged with your work, so basically that's one of the main signs of burnout, or that burnout is on the way, is when you start becoming just totally disengaged with your work and not caring anymore, especially if at some point you did care.
Right.
Another sign, of course, the exhaustion, as I mentioned, both physically, mentally, emotionally, just exhaustion. And it could also manifest as irritability, you know, getting cranky with your coworkers, with people at home, you know, with basically it has that ripple effect, like I mentioned before. And the other thing is, if you're in a position, even whether you're an entrepreneur or at a job or whatever, if you're at, you know, have some sort of career where you deal with people, and then you start to see the people as problems, then that's a huge sign of burnout. So, for example, you know, people in the healthcare field or people in mental health and even entrepreneurs with their clients, if they start to see the people or their clients as problems, that's a red flag. You know, if you see that, you know, someone emailed you or that you have an appointment with a client and you're just absolutely dreading it, and, you know, then, you know, that definitely could be a sign as well.
Right. Oh, definitely. You think about how many times someone looks at their phone and they see the caller ID come up, and they can go from being extremely happy to, crap, in an instant.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And certainly, you know, we're going to have, it's not that we're going to be 100% joyful and positive all of the time. We're not aiming for 100%. So there are going to be things that kind of feel that make our energy drop a little bit, and we might not be kind of in the mood at some point for speaking on the phone, for example. But you know, when you see that tipping point, when you're starting to notice that, you know, all your clients or all your coworkers or colleagues or, you know, are getting on your nerves, then that definitely could be a red flag.
Right, exactly. And that's the key. It's having that self-awareness to know when is it time to jump ship, so that way you can focus on what makes you happy, because otherwise you could become that hollow shell. I think everybody has that reference in their mind of someone they've met along the way that's still at a job, but they're miserable, and they go from being, let's say, the star employee to, oh my gosh, we can't get rid of this person. What do we do?
Right. Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said, what was the word you used? It was a good one. Self-awareness.
Yes.
So the term, basically, I look at it as the first step is to recognize, basically. And it does take some reflection to really step back, look at the bigger picture, and recognize when this is happening, because it's really, really easy to go from day to day, kind of get up, go to work, come home, veg in front of the TV because you're exhausted, you know, get up and do the same thing the next day. So we get in these routines, and we oftentimes will get in a rut if we feel, you know, if we're burnt out or if we get to, you know, that point. So if you're in a rut, it really takes some self-reflection, some self-awareness, some recognition to take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and, you know, what are you craving more of in life? Is there a difference between where you are now and really where you want to be in life? And, you know, what are some steps that you could take to get there? Because, you know, we can't change something that we're not aware of. So really that first step is doing some reflection in order to recognize that there's something going on in the first place.
Right. And that's so critical that you take that step, because I think so many people, they go through that routine to such a degree that they don't see what's going on, because they're just,
Yes.
they have the blinders on. Kind of like if you see horses going down the street in a city, they have the blinders on to keep their focus going straight. They're operating the same way.
You are absolutely right. Absolutely. So that's a perfect comparison. Yep.
So after that recognition where someone has that aha moment, like, man, this really sucks. What is it that somebody should do at that point when they become aware?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. First, sometimes we can reframe some things. Now, of course, we can be in a toxic environment. So a lot of it is, sometimes the environment, but sometimes we can reframe, and there are things that we can do while we're there in that job or in that position, even if it's temporarily. So, sometimes we create our own stress and overwhelm, as I had that aha moment years ago, with our thoughts. So that's where kind of this mindset shift can come in, where, let's say, at work, I'm not really caring, but I have this deadline coming up, and then I start to create this story in my head about, I'm not going to make the deadline, my stuff isn't good enough, whatever it is, right? So one thing we could do is reframe those thoughts before we get down into that spiral and before we get down into the rabbit hole of feeling crappy, right? So because basically, one thought can lead to another thought, which can lead to a whole range of feelings, and then we're feeling crappy. So the key is to catch those thoughts and reframe them with something that we believe before we spiral down. So, for example, if I'm scared about missing a deadline, I can recognize those thoughts, but then take a step back and reframe and say, okay, well, I've never missed a deadline. I generally do good work. My coworkers respect me, whatever it is that it might be before you spiral down. Now, that's temporary, right? So even if it's those little things throughout the day where we have those mindset shifts, also taking breaks throughout the day if we're really burned out, creating healthy routines during our day, taking walks. I speak to a lot of people who work through their lunch, which doesn't help if you're burnt out. You have to give your brain a break, your mind, your body, even if it's a 10-minute walk, step away from your desk. So there's little things you can do throughout the day. And then there's the bigger picture, right? So what do you do? What do you do? Because that, if you're burnt out in your job, now sometimes that will help when you create those nourishing activities throughout your day and you learn how to reframe your thinking. All of those things help while you're in that situation. And then you still have to address the bigger picture of, do I stay? Do I go? What do I need to do? And that takes some reflection. Only you can answer that. That's the thing. Because, if you ask 10 people, you're likely to get 10 different answers. And
Right,
that's
exactly.
That's going to cause more confusion and more overwhelm oftentimes. So it really takes some reflection and looking at what your strengths are, what your values are, what do you crave more of in life, and really then deciding after you take those steps to replenish while you're there is to, take responsibility for it, right? So even thinking about what's one thing that I could do to get myself closer to that place, whatever it is that you have for yourself in terms of your vision, because oftentimes when you're burnt out, dreading to go to work, just feeling like you're chained at your desk or whatever it is that it might be, that's likely not how you pictured your life. Or if you're not feeling very good about your life, think about, well, what's one thing that I can do to take responsibility for this? And whether that is, taking a look at your strengths, really looking at what is it that's a better fit for me in terms of my values, because sometimes all of those tools and techniques for the coping mechanisms while you're in that position, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it really takes the bigger picture and takes courage to take steps towards what you really want in life. And courage is the biggest thing right there.
Right. Courage can sometimes be the hardest thing, I think, for people to find because it often involves facing what they're afraid of. How do you help people do that? Because you think of it, someone's been in a position for so long, even though they're burnt out, that fear of the unknown is greater than the discomfort of being where they are.
Yes. And that's oftentimes why we get in that rut in the first place, because it's comfortable, even though it's not where we want to be and we dread going to work. We know it's predictable, right? So, we know pretty much how our day's going to go. Of course, there are probably little fires that we put out here and there or whatever. But, it's comfortable for us. And the thing is that, if there's anything that's a change, and behavior change is hard, right? Behavior change is hard, and the fear of the unknown. I mean, all of that comes up for everybody. It goes back to thinking about what do you really want in life and what is your why? I know, we've all heard about what is your why, and we hear that a lot, in this world, in this industry. But it really does help. Now, it goes back to also breaking it down into smaller chunks. So when I was mentioning, just taking one step, that's usually a huge key and a huge factor in helping someone with their fears. Of course, there's a lot of tools and techniques that can help with the underlying, fear. But ultimately, the best thing to do is to take one step at a time, because when we think of, oh my gosh, I'm in this job, I'm scared to leave, what if this, what if that, what if, but I have my, my paycheck, all of these things come up, all the what ifs, and how the heck am I going to do that? So, we start to think about how in the world am I going to make this happen? But if you break it down into smaller chunks and literally ask yourself, what's one thing that I can do right now? And then take one step at a time. Like, we don't have to necessarily know how it's all going to turn out. We don't necessarily have to know exactly every step when we first start out, but at least taking one step at a time, and the steps that feel right. And that's where we have to determine what feels right versus what's a should. Because oftentimes we're in these positions anyway because we thought we should do it. And that again takes some reflection as well. I talk to a lot of people who are in positions that they hate because it looked good on paper, right?
Right.
Or somebody else thought they should do it, or the parents thought that, they felt pressure from wherever, and then they end up unhappy. But really, the momentum will create momentum if you take one step at a time, because again, it can be overwhelming when you're thinking, oh, I'm in this job, how in the world am I going to do X, Y, and Z? Because it seems so distant from where you are right now. But if you take one step at a time, and then that momentum will create momentum, and the results, the little results, and the smaller daily choices and the smaller actions that you take every week will truly add up to the bigger picture. So one step at a time for overwhelm.
Right, exactly. So in your particular case, how did you start stepping out? Because I think for people, when they have that point of reference, like, oh, that makes sense. If they've been in that job they don't like in a basement, how can they start climbing out of it? What did you do to start changing your world?
Yeah, well, two things. I started to implement tools and techniques to reduce my stress, right? So it's not only about coping and managing your stress, but reducing and preventing further overwhelm and further stress. So it's a combination of, using or doing what you can during your day to kind of nourish your soul, to add joy in your life during the week, because sometimes we forget to have fun because we're such in a rut and a routine. So adding those things into your life that, oh yeah, I love to go to concerts. I haven't been to one in a while. So things like that to remind yourself to add joy to your life outside of work as well, or, replenish, do what you can to replenish. And then what I ended up doing when I quit my job, I kind of phased out what I was doing. So at some point I went to part-time, and then it got to where I did 2 days a week, and then I had contract positions. So I kind of phased it out. Now that's not for everybody. Some people will, quit their jobs and go full-time entrepreneur, for example, or quit their jobs and go to another position. So it comes down to what's best for you, and only you can answer that again. But those are really the two things that I did. First, while I was in the full-time positions, I would basically figure out, how can I bring more joy into this? What are some things that I can do? Whether it's using my strengths more in the job, whether it's taking breaks during the day, that sort of thing, whether it's reframing my thoughts and shifting my mindset, and then bigger picture items, which is, all right, for me, the one step at a time was phasing out that kind of work.
Right. And that's valuable, especially with looking for ways to bring that joy, because not everybody's going to be in that position where they could just change careers cold turkey. Like, that's it, I'm done, and walk away.
Right.
So finding ways to add even just moments of joy is a very powerful thing. So obviously you stepped out on your own to build a coaching business.
Yes.
What was that like in the beginning, since you went from that position of certainty and that you worked for somebody else, having things that are being consistent, to, oh, now you have to do it all. You have to attract clients. What was that feeling for you?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. So I'm in my 8th year of it. And, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because, right. In the beginning for me, it was definitely a good bit of, oh, wow, right. So every dollar that I earn, I'm earning it. I can't just go to a job and sit there for 7 hours and automatically get a paycheck,
right.
So it was definitely a different feeling, and definitely a different kind of balance. I don't always use that word because it has I don't believe in that 50-50 balance necessarily. But right. It has a different balance because you have to learn at some point to turn off. Because I've also now seen a lot of burned out entrepreneurs because they're always worried about, oh, but if I don't hustle every day, I'm not gonna do well. And you have to really define your own definition of success. You can do what you can, to bring in the money, to bring in the clients, and you have to take care of yourself. Because ultimately your clients need you, your business needs you, your friends, your family, and you have to take care of yourself because, you can easily go from burnt out in a job and then take those same behaviors and burn yourself out in entrepreneurship as well.
Right.
So,
oh, yeah.
I had to find a new way of that balancing act.
Right. Exactly. It's so critical you do that. So, how did you find that balance? Because one of the things I see so often, especially entrepreneurs, it's that go 24/7 mentality. Sleep, yes. Whatever. Just get more caffeine in the system.
Yes.
How do you create, instead of using balance, let's say abundance, how do you create more abundance in different areas in your life?
Mm-hmm. So it's something I feel very strongly about, actually, because, again, if we don't take care of ourselves, then, we're going to burn out. So it's all about self-care and recognizing when we need to take a break, when we need to stop, when we need to take a mental health day. So basically, it goes down to carving out time for yourself, because oftentimes we're not going to do it unless it's carved out, and make that non-negotiable, right? Basically, you have to replenish, because if we're just constantly giving, then our batteries are going to die, right? We need to recharge the batteries. Sleep, so super important, because I know for me personally, when I don't sleep well, when I'm not getting enough sleep, it has this major ripple effect of the next day, I'm not productive, I'm not efficient, I can't concentrate, I'm not showing up 100% for my clients, that sort of thing. So you have to think of that as well. It's not all about you, right?
Right.
It can have this major ripple effect. So for me, that balance, that abundance, all of that, it came from, first of all, setting some healthy boundaries, and having faith that, you know what, I'm going to be okay if I take out if I carve out time to go do something fun, if I'm not hustling 24/7, you know what, it's okay, because I need to recharge, I need to replenish, because I'm going to burn out otherwise. So what I have done is I've created these boundaries, and I know boundaries can sound a little bit harsh, but basically I will cut off a time where I don't answer emails. I will unplug. I have in my contract with my clients the days and the times that I work, so that if they email me at 10 p.m. my time, if they email me at 10 p.m. at night, they know that I likely won't respond until the next morning. Because that comes down, that whole concept of you teach people how to treat you is very true in this case. So if I right away, and this goes even if you're in a job, that's how people burn themselves out too, is that they're not taking some time to unplug. So let's say if your colleague, your coworker, your client, whoever it is, emails you at 9 or 10 p.m. or, whatever, when you're already exhausted, they're going to come to expect that from you. Maybe you're a night owl, so maybe 10 p.m. is not the best example, but you have to figure out what works for you and take that time to recharge and replenish. And for me, taking weekends, doing something fun on the weekend, you know what I mean? Like just taking that time to recharge and unplug has benefited me, and I just had to figure out what works for me, and that's really the bottom line.
Right, and that is a very critical point, especially in the world we live in today, that people are connected to things 24/7, that people want this immediate response, not realizing if you don't take time out for yourself, then you're going to be giving out everything you have. Like for me, after a certain time, I don't look at my email anymore.
Yeah.
In terms of answering phone calls, the list of people I actually take a call from drops down to personal friends and family, and that's it.
Yes. And honestly, most things can wait until the next day. It's usually
Right.
not an emergency, and especially coming from the mental health field, an emergency was a totally different thing, right? Or literally, someone might be having a major breakdown, or you know what I mean? I mean, it definitely, it kind of in the day-to-day for most professions, if you're not on call, most things can wait until the next morning, or the next day. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of taking time out for yourself and honoring that and not feeling guilty about it, and knowing that it's going to be okay. It's not to say you're not going to provide excellent customer service, that you're not going to have this great rapport, things like that. You just have to find what works for you, and it ultimately helps everybody else. Because for me, if I'm online all the time, if I don't take time at night, I can't show up 100% like I could if you know what I mean? If I don't recharge, I'm not going to really provide the best service in the bigger picture.
Right, exactly. I like to jokingly say when it comes to separating things out, after a certain point, unless it involves the destruction of a building, loss of eyesight or a limb, or something like along those lines of like, there's an earthquake, what do we do? It can wait until the next day.
It's true. Yep. So, yeah.
And that's the key to it. We have to look at setting those boundaries. Otherwise, we can quickly find ourselves burned out. As you can see it all the time in people. If they're not looking forward to each day, I wake up going, yes, another day to make a difference in the world. Versus, really? Already? Ugh. It
Right.
makes a difference.
It absolutely makes a difference. And you're right. There's that difference of dreading to get out of bed and, oh crap, there's another day, dreading to go to work versus, yeah, being excited to get out of bed and looking forward to serving. And there's definitely a big difference. So sometimes it takes some reflection, going back to that and thinking, all right, if something needs to change, what can I do? So.
Right, exactly. And, obviously, since we've been talking about self-care, and it's important that you can be able to do things. And I think one of the biggest things, especially for entrepreneurs in the coaching arena, is to have that ability to leverage time. So obviously you can't help everybody on the 1-1 ratio and keep your sanity, because there's 7 billion people on the planet and there's only 24 hours in a day, so you have to do something to scale up. What have you done in your business so that way you can help more people yet still maintain that proper balance in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I created, in addition to the one-on-one, I created a self-study program. It's called From Burnout to Bliss, and it's 28 days, and it's 10 lessons or chapters over that 28 days. And the bigger picture, it's 28 days to a happier, more relaxed you. And I created the program because I was speaking with so many people who felt like their life was becoming a list of shoulds and their stress levels were through the roof. So basically, it breaks down the steps into small chunks, and that's why I did 10 lessons over 28 days, so that you have time to implement. It's basically super doable. It's fun little steps to take, and so that's on my site at courses.nancievito.com. But basically, yeah, it's a self-study, so you don't have to be there at a certain time or commit to 3 p.m. on a Wednesday or whatever it is. You just kind of log in, and whenever you have the time or make the time, it's available for you. So yeah, I'm glad about the course, because you're right. There's you can only do so many one-on-ones.
Right. And I think for many entrepreneurs, that's that turning point when you realize you have to look for tools that you can scale your business with. Otherwise,
Yes.
if you're just doing one-on-one work, you've created a job for yourself instead of the purpose of creating a business, so you can build, ultimately design it to allow you to live your lifestyle the way that you want to live it.
Exactly. And this has also allowed me to have that, again, that word balance. I don't mean to use that again, but, it basically has allowed me to have some downtime and that sort of thing.
Right. So now, because you've done these things, you create programs and such, what are some of the things that you've been able to do in life after you started building a business around the things that you truly wanted to accomplish?
So I like to travel, and I have a lot of family in New York. So, for example, if I want to go to New York for a week or a month, I can do that now. And so that's, really the best example of being able to do what feels good to me, and also, earn a living at the same time, is to not feel so tied to my computer all the time, or not feel so tied to, that I have to be here or I have to, be there at a certain time. So, between that and then carving out time each week to do something fun is important to me.
Right. And you have to do those things to carve out those fun things. So now, speaking of fun, since you have this time, what have been some of those things that you've been able to do now that you've been running your own business that you couldn't do in the past, besides traveling to New York, for a week or a month at a time, things like that?
Well, yeah, that's the biggest thing is I don't know if I would have been able to go to New York for a month, while I'm at a regular job. But you know what? Just being able to set my own schedule around my energy and around my strengths, and basically, I feel like it comes down to living life on my own terms.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and there's, examples from week to week of, just the little things of not having to ask permission was huge for me. Like, even, for example, at my jobs, I would literally have to ask if I had a doctor's appointment or if I had to come in late for something. I would have to ask permission to go somewhere or to do something or to. So I know that sounds silly, but it's such a big difference in just, being able to set your own schedule. And then, yeah, I mean, between traveling and doing the things that I like to do, which is, spending time with my friends and making sure to do those things that I enjoy, such as like going to concerts and things like that. I definitely make sure to add those things in.
Right. And that's powerful because you think about with the world that we live in, people have become conditioned to asking permission to like, oh, I need to come in late because I have to go to the doctor or someone has to take their kid to school or whatever that variety is. People are so used to it, they don't think about it, that their life is controlled by their work instead of how can you build your life to control your work.
Yeah. And that's powerful. It's really powerful. And it's a mindset shift for a lot of people if they've been in that, if they've been in jobs and positions for so many years. It's definitely a mindset shift because, it's kind of like when let's say we want to lose weight and we can't lose weight or get in shape or get healthy by going to the gym once or by eating healthy for a day right. So we sometimes expect to change behaviors and to change ways of thinking overnight, and it doesn't always happen that way.
Right.
Yeah, so sometimes it takes some, again, reflection, some recognition, and sometimes it takes some reframing, in order to really live the life that you want to live. Because a lot of people have that mindset of it's not possible or how in the world could I make that happen? And again, goes down to at least take one step at a time. And, I've seen so many people go from just stuck, overwhelmed, burnt out, just not happy, to truly flourishing in life and just loving what they're doing, whether it's career or just the life that they've designed, just doing more of what makes you happy. You have to make a conscious effort to do that. It doesn't always fall in your lap.
Right, exactly. It's so critical to do those things. It makes all the difference in the world. So, Nancie, as we wrap everything up, what's one thing that people can do today so they can start taking control of their life and move forward so they can avoid burnout?
Well, I know I've mentioned reflection and recognizing. I know we've talked about that a good bit. And I feel like that's a really good first step is to take a few minutes, even if as a lot of people like to journal, if you don't like to write it down, at least carve out some kind of quiet time and to look at where you are now and to identify the root cause. Okay, like if there's something that you feel needs to change in your life, to identify the root cause, and that's the perfect starting place before taking that one step.
Right, definitely. And that in itself is valuable and important because unless you know what that root cause is, it's so easy to miss out on what you should be doing. Exactly. So how can people learn more about you and ultimately work with you?
Yeah, so the best place to get in touch with me is on my website. It's nancievito.com, and it's Nancie with an I-E, Nancie, V like Victor, ITO.com. And I have a burnout quiz on my site as well, if you're listening to this and wondering if you are on the brink of burnout or not. So that's also a good place to start. And there's also places to get in contact with me as well. But feel free to head to my site and to take the burnout quiz. And then there's also a link for the burnout course, the 28-day self-care program. And if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed and really want to carve out some time for self-care, that's on there as well.
Oh, excellent. Well, Nancie, I want to thank you for coming into the Big Movement podcast today to share your wisdom about getting past burnout and start doing things that you're passionate about, because life is worth living.
It is. Thank you for having me, Byron. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.